And welcome once again to Community Viewpoint. I'm John Pollock, your host for this segment. And we have the honor of having with us today Scott Lewis, our fire chief, and also the head of emergency services, emergency management.
Emergency management, yes.
And with him is Patrick Lazenby, Nye County Emergency Management.
Yes, sir.
And as Scott said, you're his right-hand man.
Absolutely, yes.
So we're going to be talking about radiological incidents, nuclear incidents, and during one of my past meetings for the Nuclear Waste and Environmental Advisory Committee here in town, a question was asked, who will be out there in case there are some accidents? They didn't define them, the extent of the accident, if it's a bomb or if it's a something from Los Alamos that's traveling and it falls off the truck. Who's over there? Like Scott had mentioned, if it's a bomb, that kind of takes a lot of the thought process out of it. But if it's a regular accident, then we could start talking about the different groups that are out there to help us in our daily travels through the town. If there's things that need to be picked up, and if we have concerns about hazards on the road, who is there? Like who did it to begin with? It was DOE was carrying it. The state of Nevada gets involved. The county. Who's out there for us?
Sure, there's absolutely a tremendous number of groups that are out there for us on a regular basis, and depending on the nature of the material that involved in, as you described, as an accident versus an intentional act.
Yeah.
So accidents, we actually have risks, but they're not great risks because we don't have a rail system that goes through Nye County.
Right.
Most of our risks would be associated with small incidents, such as even something as simple as smoke detectors, that type of issue.
Yeah.
All the way up to some of the materials that are being transported through our state, through our county, with end locations and various federal facilities, or even possibly even going elsewhere. But those types of incidents are monitored at multiple levels. It's not necessarily telling us every exact route, but we have a good idea when some very serious materials are being transported in close proximity. And so that drives our response methodologies. But in almost every case, the federal government is monitoring all those shipments. They're predetermined, pre-described with very little variance or deviance from those routes. And in some cases, there's even a security force assigned. So there's multiple components. If an accident were to occur, though, they're usually right on top of that.
I remember the transuranic waste, the true waste. California had a different response than Nevada. For a while, they were assigning state troopers to the shipments. But then we found out some of the shipments didn't even have to be placarded because they were not radiologically, they were inert basically for the outside person. So that went by the wayside. They over-responded is what it was. So,
that's exactly right.
But the federal government usually always knows, and we don't always know sometimes. But they're always in the know, and they talk to the state of Nevada, and that would be the Highway Patrol.
Well, it's Highway Patrol, DOE, Nevada Department of Energy. There's a number of groups that would be involved in emergency management at both the state level and the county level. So we are part of groups, working groups that hold regular meetings. So we have a complete understanding of what materials are being moved from what locations. Not the super sensitive materials. Obviously, there's security risk with that. But routine, regular materials that have been contaminated through other processes that are being removed possibly through dirt or other mediums that are being trucked or transported to safe locations. We're aware of those types of shipments. And so we have the ability to not only monitor it, but we have the ability to understand exactly what the risks are associated with that material. And it's actually quite helpful for us. And in most cases, they're relatively routine and can be somewhat boring, if you will, about the meetings because it's done all the time and there's very little risk associated with it. The serious materials are designed with such casks and other materials that have been tested through rail, dropping, different types of impacts, explosions to try and break those casks, and they're virtually indestructible.
Right, that reminds me of days when I worked for the Yucca Mountain Project. I had to watch those constantly.
Exactly.
And they still are those videos, and some of the equipment is still at the museum. There's a section there that deals with the former Nevada test site and also Yucca Mountain. If you'd like to go to the museum in town to view some of those things, they're still available for you over there. But you have a lot of equipment thanks to the fact that we're called collar counties around the former Nevada test site. I'll always call it the NTS rather than N2S2 with their acronyms. But they call it a tipping fee. All of the radiological shipments that come in, there's a certain amount of money that goes into emergency management people, which is you, Lincoln County, Clark County.
There's various counties that are impacted.
We
yes.
call them the collar counties because they circled in the Nevada test site. So they have the equipment, you have the equipment to be there in a case of an accident. And some of those things would be actual trucks.
So it's a wide variety of equipment, and this is part of why Patrick's here today. Patrick manages a lot of the grants that we seek. So there's different groups that we will go to them with and it's not a wish list, but it's more of a desire list for equipment, vehicles, all in the support of response to radioactive incidents. And that list then goes and gets voted upon whether or not we can receive that equipment for that particular dollar value that's allotted to it. So those shipments and those fees that you mentioned are instrumental in us being better prepared for such incidents.
Okay.
And I don't know if Patrick wants to speak to just any of the grants that he regularly
Well,
maintains.
the ones that we normally maintain are like what you have on the table, the Emergency Programs Working Group. It's an annual grant that's administrated through the state. Like Chief just said, we apply for it and they tell us how much we might get and what we can apply. It all has to have some kind of a hazmat radiological tie-in. And like this year, for instance, we're approved for a little over $90,000 to buy a new handheld detector to replace one we have that's almost 15 years old.
Oh, right. Yeah, okay.
The one we're looking at is a handheld detector. The one we're replacing comes in 2 big Pelican boxes.
Okay.
That's how old it is, and that's the kind of things we look at. We also have the State Emergency Response Commission that we get, the United We Stand grant that is paid for. Everybody that has those license plates that say United We Stand on them,
Yeah.
part of that fee comes to the counties for the United We Stand grant.
Oh,
And
I
that
didn't know
has to have more of a terrorism tie-in, but they also have the OPTI, the Operational Planning, Training, and Exercise, which has to have another hazmat tie-in. So there's funding out there that we can do training, equipment, planning, all sorts of things.
So, but there's requirements of us too, not just completing the paperwork, but we also have to demonstrate our exercises, or we have to be able to go in there and demonstrate how our responses went, and that's what we did for this particular year. We demonstrated the responses for hazardous material response and incidents, and that actually adds that catalyst. Everything that we do has to have a nexus between what the funds came from and what the intent of their use is.
Okay.
So we have to demonstrate that. We simply just can't go buy a new fire vehicle that has no nexus whatsoever to hazardous material or that type of response.
Oh, interesting. I remember some years ago when I was on a group of volunteers for the emergency or environmental management for it was called a CAB, Community Advisory Board. We worked with the DOE to look to see if we could plug a hole in emergency management over in Shoshone. They have a fire department over there, Southern Inyo Fire Protection District, and there are shipments that come constantly from Baker, the back route over there to the Nevada test site. And the DOE, we made them aware that they were not funded at all. And even though they weren't in Nevada, they made the exception that to give them some funds to help them along. Otherwise, their fire departments are going to go dark at the time because they have no funding whatsoever. So DOE stepped in to help them protect us, the traveler that's on the road over there, and those are 2-lane highways in the middle of nowhere. So that was very thoughtful of them, but it was through our intervention also that that got there, and the monies were there from the federal government.
Yeah, absolutely. And those shipments that you're describing going from Baker and going through there end up going through Nye County as well. So
Yeah.
there's a good connection
There's a
between
tie
the two.
in there, yeah. So they understood that, and so they were included in a lot of the funding back then. Hopefully, still yet.
Is that what's referred to as the NSAB now, the Nevada Site Specific Advisory Board, or is that a whole different?
Yes, and they're looking for members. You want to
They
be a
are.
member
That
of
was a
it?
shameless
are.
plug for Barb.
Yeah, we are.
Please look into the NSAB, the Nevada Site Specific Advisory Board. It's a good way to get information about all of this and just to be part of the help.
I had a gentleman, Frank, was on here, and we wound up having it reran twice over here, so he got a good some good mileage over here.
Frank
So,
Bonesteel.
Frank Bonesteel.
yes, yes. So anyway, is there anything else we want to bring out there for the folks?
Sure. So LEPC, our local emergency preparedness committee, is a group that consists of our stakeholders throughout the county, and they bring valuable information. And a lot of the things that we're talking about, hazardous material and other types of things and hazards that are pertinent to our respective communities, is brought out, and they actually have say on what we go forth with on a lot of these different grants.
Oh, okay.
So it's a very important, and we have quarterly meetings. So if anyone's interested in being at, they have to be tied to a stakeholder, but there's so many different areas that they can join under. It's usually not an issue.
So if you want to go to one of the meetings, if they're having it probably after COVID, site-specific advisory boards, find out when they'll have it here. And you could ask, everybody will be at these meetings. So they have at least one or two in the rural areas per year. So yes, there are many different facets, different groups of people out there looking after our best interests. If there are issues, nuclear, radiologically, hazardous material, they're out there on the federal, state, county level. And these are the people that are in the trenches close to us. So I want to thank you guys for coming here and
Thank you for having us.
sharing this with the folks out there. So maybe we'll talk about this again in the future if this brings up any more questions.
Sure, absolutely. We're available to you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching. And welcome once again to Community Viewpoint. We're back. We have more to speak of. So I don't want to let you go without just squeezing every last bit of information out, because it's great. You know, it's fantastic to share this with the public. And Patrick, you wanted to mention?
Well, I mentioned the NSAB. We had our NSAB meeting yesterday, and one of the things that they brought up is something I think is important for most people, everybody to know, is that a lot of the radioactive waste that comes through Nye County isn't old bombs or old testing equipment. It's usually medical waste, PPE, small contaminated machines. It's considered low-level waste. It's not something that's going to blow up the whole world if there's a spill. There's going to be, it's just low-level waste.
So yeah, let me mention that when you see that diamond placard with 7, is it? The number 7 for radiologic.
Oh, now you're testing.
Don't freak out that it's not plutonium or something like that. A lot of times it's just what he said. It's rags,
Right.
stuff that's been contaminated, tools.
Soil.
Soil is going to it's low-level waste, and it's going to Area 5 over at the former Nevada test site. So it's not spent nuclear fuel. It's not anything really drastic. It's stuff that's just slightly radioactive. So
And there are so many monitoring agencies that are involved in those transports, so they know exactly what the nature of the material is, and if there's any indicators of issues with that particular shipment, stopped immediately.
I remember going in on a tour for Yucca Mountain in a bus, and they mentioned it to us, if you have been a cancer victim and you had some radioactive stuff inside of you, and if you go through, there's a detector before you get to the gate, you could be stopped. One of my tours got stopped, and the guy had to explain, and then they let us through after everybody got off the bus too.
Right.
So there's equipment that monitors the trucks, the low-level waste that before they go into the Nevada test site, and it's very carefully monitored. things that you don't think about, I've seen in the past. He knows, both of you know a lot more than I do. But there's a lot of people watching out for our best interests.
Yes.
And historically, Nye County has taken an approach where they had most of the resources located specifically down in southern Nye in the Pahrump area, and with the NNSS. But one of the first things that we did when Patrick and I started working together is create a better plan where we had our resources deployed in multiple areas of the county. So therefore, it would be a quicker response to those types of potential accidents. So we actually have teams up in the northern end. We have teams centralized. And then in the south end, we're also joined by multiple agencies, including out of Clark County or the NNSS. So we've provided a better plan and a better approach to protect our citizens and those are traveling through our county. But you know, I'd be remiss, and I'm sure Patrick feels the same way. A lot of those responders who are trained to the levels for a technician and such throughout our county, and everyone is trained in awareness and operations from the fire side. But there are a lot of them are volunteers. And so these volunteers are out there responding and protecting their communities, doing regular training exercises. We work with our community partners, Desert View Hospital. So when we do these scaled incidents and practices and trainings, we'll actually go through each process of deconning, making sure there's a gross decon on scene, making sure there's a secondary decon in the stripping process of clothing, whatever the articles are, before loading people in ambulances. And then we work with Desert View Hospital to make sure they're appropriately set up for a third decon and then before entry into a facility like that. So there's multiple steps in our training operations. And so it's a huge endeavor, but it's well worth it because obviously we want to be best prepared.
Right, because we mentioned, I talked about Mountain View Hospital had an area over there because they're the closest, they were the closest one student had a test site on that side of the mountain some years ago. And we took a tour through that, and they were showing it off to us what they had in preparation to Yucca Mountain, to be determined sometime in the future. But those places are out there, and Mountain View, our own hospital here in town also, and has a way to decon you before sending you on to someplace else.
In the deconning process, you know, you automatically think of this Herculean process. Most of the time, it's not.
No, you're a
It's
little
simply stripping off clothing. It's simply, you know, washing off.
put you in a kid's pool.
It's a pretty simple process.
Yeah.
And scrubbing gently is not even as vigorous, you know, where you wear your skin out. It's just our skin is one of our best protectors. We
Yes.
simply want to rid any potential material on our skin. And so we go through these various stages and these different preparations. And then we get them the necessary medical care that they might need.
Excellent. So what else could we be looking at for protection in the future for hazardous material?
Well, one of the things that we're doing is we're continually expanding on not only our training programs, but the acquisition of the appropriate type of equipment. Patrick mentioned a new handheld device. That is instrumental in our successes because one of the things we need to do is be able to detect through various means. So historically, it was a contact, and you would take the contact and do an analysis approach, and it was multiple kits, multiple processes, and it took time. The new equipment is almost instantaneous. It uses almost like a FLIR type of approach with thermal capabilities. So in some cases, you can simply aim this detection device at it, or a simple contact where it gives you almost instantaneous results for just a myriad of different types of materials.
Okay.
So it gives us greater ability to have a better preparation and a better response to incidents where we may not necessarily know what we're dealing with.
Interesting. I was thinking about there's a company called American Science and Surplus that had back in the Midwest that would years ago. They were selling Geiger counters and stuff like that back in the day when I was thinking about that. You know, I never went and bought one.
We still use them.
I know.
We do. We have them
still-
calibrated on a regular basis with the state. And so we have so many different detection devices available to our respective teams. And it's
But
pretty,
they're in your hands. You know what to do with them. You know, I was a regular civilian.
Yeah.
Oh, that looks cool. I want to
Right.
buy one of those.
yeah, that's true.
Yes. So it's best that I didn't. And so I would have wasted my money. It would have been sitting in a closet someplace.
Yeah, but you know, we really haven't had any issues that deal with the radioactive material. We're always, you know, aware that that could happen, and I think one of the best things, you know, in our preparation and prevention is identifying, again, where those materials are going to be transported. We already know what the nature of those materials are, so we're well ahead of the game, and we have the subject matter experts in our area, no matter what the issue is, that can quickly respond and provide us necessary information.
And there are places on certain highways that can detect radiological devices too that are very discreet. And so sometimes you hear about them and sometimes you know about them.
All part of our Homeland Security initiatives.
And it's surprising how sensitive they are. How
Yes.
minute of a
Like I said, on the bus going into
Right.
the site,
surprising.
hey, you get off the bus.
Yeah, but they're, as you mentioned, they're throughout the state, and so there's a lot of materials, and there's only specific routes they can even take throughout the state.
Right.
Right.
And so there's a deviation from that, or there's a cessation of movement. There's automatic, follow-up, if you would like to state it like that.
You know what? And that brings up a story I was just thinking about at one of the NSAB meetings we were at. This is how closely they're regulated and watched. There was a shipment coming in that had to be basically just rerouted up to another U-turn because of a traffic accident.
Okay.
And that was considered a variation because it didn't take the specific route that it was supposed to take to get here. That's how closely they're monitored and regulated.
So there's a response with that, and then there's an investigation and a follow-up and a report that's generated to explain why that deviation occurred. So there's multiple levels, and we get the opportunity to see what those reasons
I
were.
remember that with the True Waste in New Mexico, when they had to take a different route because of construction on the highway. They had to answer why they took that deviation. Yes, yes.
Right.
So it's all monitored. They know exactly where you're going, where you've been.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yeah, even if there's a stoppage of the transport for X amount of time, everything's regulated.
And I'm sure that they stop here from time to time. And if it's stopped here, it's not causing you any grief, any issues, because it's most undoubtedly low-level waste, and it's barely detectable. And they're not going to be near any large populated area in a parking lot or anything. So, sure, if you want to bring the subject up to somebody, who would you call?
Which particular subject?
If you have something
Well,
radiologic.
for us, just contact DEM. And the first person you most likely speak with is Patrick.
Okay.
And then he'll field your question. And if it's something that he can just provide you some information on, whether it be pamphlets or whether it be a contact at the state level, we have all that at our fingertips. If you need to speak with me directly about an operational process or a procedure or something along those lines, he'll get the information over to me as well.
Or if you want to learn a lot more, you can join the site-specific advisory boards too,
Yeah.
and become a volunteer for environmental management for Nevada, the former Nevada test site. And you'll meet a lot of people. You'll meet Patrick,
You meet Patrick.
and you'll be there too,
Yeah,
right?
I'll be there too.
Yes.
But, when you speak of the NNSS and those folks, we're out there with them on a regular basis. We train with them. We're in constant contact. And we respond to different types of incidents with each other, not just always something to do with radioactive material. They respond with us in car accidents, other transportation-related issues on the 95. So we have a good working relationship. They're a good and solid mutual aid responder with us. And so we appreciate those types of interactions and those commitments from different agencies. And the same thing happens in Clark County. The meetings that Patrick and I attend involve just a myriad of different people at different levels
Right.
from all over the country. And so they regularly attend our LEPC meetings, which is what we had talked about. So if there's anything specific, they're there to address those questions.
Right. At this time, there are no Nevada test site tours. People have asked about those. They were suspended during COVID-19 for an indefinite time. So they will return in the future because they are well attended by the buses get filled each time. It's very much part of our history back in the Cold War period and the former Nevada test site. So you could call the DOE and you could type in on your computer to find out the tours and what the status is. So once again, I want to thank you, gentlemen, and we'll see you again sometime soon.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching. I appreciate it. If there are any more questions in the near future, please share them with me or Scott or Patrick. All right, thank you, and we'll see you next time.